welcome to the first of Bright Green's interviews with the candidates for the deputy leadership of the Welsh Green Party. Before we go any further, before I introduce our candidate that's with us today, what I want you to do is to scroll down and hit that subscribe button straight away. It means that you won't miss any of the videos that we're putting out with the other candidates in this election, any of the videos we're putting out on anything else, and it also helps us massively at Bright Green too. So before you do anything else, hit that subscribe button and keep watching. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our candidate for today. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Debra Cooper. Debra, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure to be with you. So I'm going to kick you off with a relatively straightforward question, hopefully. Why do you think you're the best person to be deputy leader of the Wales Green Party?
Well, I think I am one of the people that should be considered as deputy leadership. I wouldn't say that I'm the best candidate. I am a candidate that has a lot of experience in campaigning in my own area in Cardiff North. I've written leaflets, I've gone out into the streets and I've met locals. So I know how things are changing in my local area. What I don't know really is what is happening further afield. So I have to say that I have an open book in some respects. I can't say that I know what should happen throughout Wales. I just think that we should be talking more together and feel like we're a national party, because at the moment I know people in Cardiff and I've met a few people anecdotally in different areas, but I don't think we have a system set up at the moment, which means that we act as a Wales party. We don't seem to be joined together the way that I'd like us to be joined together, working together and knowing about what is happening in each of the areas. So what I'll bring to the job, I'm not saying I'm the best candidate, but what I will bring to the job is the wish to be an all Wales party, a true all Wales party, which means that I'd like to know what's going on in the north, what's going on in the west, and it not be just centralised in Cardiff and South East Wales, which appears to be the way we are at the moment.
So in terms of becoming an all Wales party, as you put it, what do you think have been the barriers to achieving that in the past, and what do you think that you'll bring that will mean that you'll be able to create that all Wales party that you described?
Well, the most obvious barrier at the moment is COVID, because the time I've been active in the party is the last 2 years, and throughout those last 2 years we haven't been able to get together other than virtually on a computer in a Zoom room, which is the obvious holdback as far as I've been inside here in the Green Party and active. But what I really would like to do, if I did become leader, or deputy leader I should say, is to travel around Wales and see what people are doing, the reality of what people are doing on the ground, what local campaigns are going on. If I can't do that, I'd like to have a better setup on the internet so that we find out what people are doing and celebrate as well what's happening all around Wales.
So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about where the Wales Green Party is at the moment. So we are now 5 months removed from the Senedd elections that took place earlier this year. Why do you think it was that the Greens didn't make the breakthrough and win their first seat in the Senedd this year?
That's a difficult question to answer. All I can do is speak for what I did, and I feel that I worked quite well in that campaign, and what I did on a local level in my area has increased the vote share. I don't know if you've looked at the figures, but Cardiff North had the biggest vote share increase in Wales. It had a vote share increase of 138%. I can't answer for what happened in the rest of Wales, because that's part of what I was saying earlier on. I don't know what's happening in the rest of Wales. So what I do think is that there is no reason why we shouldn't be more successful than we are, that I can see. So if I can't see what that reason is, I'd like to look for it and create the kind of atmosphere in the Wales Green Party that will allow us to increase our votes. And I think part of that, and the most important part of that to me, is increasing membership. For me, being active in the local area, I know the activity in Cardiff has increased quite dramatically. And I know in particular in Cardiff North, our membership has gone up quite dramatically. And I put that down to the fact that we actually have boots on the ground, so to speak. I work in a campaign called the Northern Meadows campaign, and it's a very strong campaign. During the time of the election, we were out on the streets, we were campaigning about it. I'm still involved in the campaign. It's not just something I did for election purposes, it's something I believe in. So throughout this last year, I have been campaigning with the Northern Meadows campaign to stop a bill that's happening on green space in Cardiff, in our area. So I can only speak for what I've done locally, and what I've done locally is increase the membership and increase the vote share.
I guess more broadly, the Wales Green Party, obviously for viewers who don't know, is a semi-autonomous wing of the Green Party of England and Wales. If you look at the rest of the UK, in the north of Ireland, the Green Party there has held seats in the Northern Irish Assembly for many years. The Scottish Greens have had parliamentary seats in the Scottish Parliament ever since it was founded, and now are in government in Scotland. In England and Wales, in England, the Greens have an MP in Caroline Lucas, are running in administration in more than a dozen councils across England, and yet in Wales, the Greens have never broken into the Senedd or the Welsh Assembly as it was before, and at the last local elections only won one council seat. What do you think is going wrong in Wales, and how do you see yourself fixing that?
I can't answer for what's gone wrong because I've only been in the party 2 years, and during the time I've been in the party, like I say, I've been increasing the vote locally. What is not happening is the votes doesn't seem to be increasing nationally, neither does the membership. And I think I can't understand that at the moment, and part of the reason I want to be involved in the leadership is to actually see what's going on in the other parties. Now, I'm not criticising them in the other parts of Wales. I mean, I'm not criticising them because I don't know enough. And I think in order to answer that question, I'd have to have more knowledge, which I don't have now.
Okay, I'm going to move on a little bit to looking forward.
I would like to say as well, I'm also aware that in Europe and in New Zealand, the Greens are growing quite dramatically. So it's not just in Britain. So I think in Wales, we've got to be honest, we've got to be looking at ourselves and seeing where we are now and making an actual strategy to move forward to increase votes, because there's no reason why we shouldn't be increasing votes. 4 years ago, people didn't know there was a climate emergency. The general public was not aware of that climate emergency. And now that they are, I've got to be honest and say that the Green Party in Wales has got no excuses. You know, if we can't find out and grow our party in the emergency situation which we are in now, then I don't know what the future is for the Green Party in Wales. But having said that, I'm not prepared to just throw my hands up in the air and go, oh dear. I actually am quite hardworking, and I think I've demonstrated that. I'll go back and say that locally we have grown dramatically in Cardiff North. And I would like to support everybody else throughout Wales to, first of all, find out what the difficulties are and then move forward with growing the party. Now, I think one of the difficulties with growing the party is communication. And it's not just communication between ourselves as a Green Party, as a Welsh Green Party, it's communication with the electorate. Now, if we can't persuade the electorate that we are a strong party, then we're in trouble. But I do think we can persuade the electorate that we are a strong party. I think the difference between England and Wales and as a party and Wales as a party is that you have a Conservative government in England, which is also responsible for UK-wide policies. And you've got the Welsh government in Wales, which is responsible for the devolved activities. Now, in Wales, there's a history, and I'm part of that history because I was born and bred in Wales. I grew up in the Thatcher years, so I know how strong the move was towards supporting the Wales Labour. And for a long time, I was a supporter of Wales Labour. And there is still that part of our society which remembers Thatcher years and forevermore will vote Labour. So if you're asking me what's going wrong, part of what's going wrong is that we haven't actually analysed why it is that people haven't moved away from Welsh Labour, having the history that we do. So that, I think, is something that we need to look at, because from my perspective, the Welsh Government are saying a lot of the right things. They've done better in Wales in terms of the way Mark Drakeford is than Boris Johnson is with COVID. So he's won a lot of brownie points with that. But we haven't looked in enough depth at what he means when he says that he's going to put the climate in the front and centre of every policy he makes. So I think one of the things we have to do, and it's not an exciting type of policy, it's looking at the nitty-gritty of really what is he doing to actually prove that that is the case. Now, in the Northern Meadows, part of the reason that we not won the argument, although I think we can, is that what the government is trying to do is build a hospital. It's not even a hospital, it's a centre, a cancer centre, on a green space in the north of Cardiff. I don't know if you want me to go into too much detail about this, but it's the last green space in Cardiff. Now, the reason these had a lot of support up to this point is because it's for a cancer centre. But we've also got specialists in cancer care saying it's the wrong location, it's unsafe for cancer patients because it needs to be based near an emergency department, so basically in a hospital with a trauma centre, because of all the things that can go awry if somebody has a bad reaction to chemotherapy. So we've got a very strong argument in terms of the environmental arguments and the clinical argument for why that centre should not be built on the Northern Meadows. And still Welsh Government are pushing and trying to get that centre built on the Northern Meadows. So this is where we have to really, really analyse what is going on here. And at this point, I'm going to say it's a question of the money and the MIN system. So this is going to turn a lot of people off who are interested in policy, unless they actually are willing to go down the route of looking at the MIN mutual investment model and analysing why Welsh Government thinks that it should be borrowing all of this money and leaving it for our future generations to pay back. Now, if we're going to be analytical about what's going wrong with the Green Party in Wales, I would imagine that the first thing to say is we've got a Labour government who has been well supported, and historically it has been well supported. Two, we have an anti-conservative, in general, there's a lot of anti-conservative rhetoric in Wales. We have a relationship with Plaid which is not quite clear. So we have all of these things. I think we really need to, from my point of view, we need to be the Green Party. We need to stand alone in many respects and criticise every single party that doesn't believe what we believe. Because what happens at the moment is that all of the other parties are looking at our policies, they're taking out the best bits of our policies and rewording them and saying that they belong to the other parties. So realistically, it's not something that I can come up with and say, it's not a happy policy really in a way. It means look at the money, look at the detail, look at the contracts that are going on at the moment with the different contractors. And it's a boring thing to do in many respects, but I think that's where the Green Party has to go. In our case, it has to look at what Welsh Government is actually doing on the ground and why the decisions that it's making are being made. Maybe that's a difficult thing to explain in this situation, because I've just had a meeting this morning with a lot of people thinking about what could possibly be the reason that the government would build on a meadow in a climate emergency when it's not the best place. So I won't go into any more detail because that'll just confuse your listeners, but it is something that I'm doing a lot more research about.
That's incredibly helpful. There's a few things that you said there that I want to pick up on. The first of which is, it might have been me mishearing, but you talked there about for you want to see the Greens standing alone, And you mentioned what you described as, I think, a confused or confusing relationship the Greens have with Plaid. What's your position on the agreement that's been made between the Greens and Plaid in Cardiff for this year's local elections?
Well, it's no surprise to locals because they already know my position on this. I can see the sense of us standing two candidates and the other party standing two candidates when it's a 4-candidate board. That's the sense I can see. But for myself, and it's no secret, in North Cardiff last year, what happened was the Plaid Cymru candidates resigned just before the Senedd elections because he'd been supporting, well, basically working with the Greens. We actually were in agreement. Plaid Cymru was supporting the fact that the hospital shouldn't be built. They were told then by their leadership that the leadership would not be calling in the planning, and also Leanne Wood spoke saying that the cancer centre had to be built, and Leanne Wood is a Plaid Cymru representative. She was a Senedd candidate at the time. So my personal view, it's not shared with everybody, but my personal view is it doesn't do us any favours if we confuse the electorate. I think we have to have a clear policy and state our clear policy as the Green Party.
So I guess then more broadly, the political field in Wales is quite crowded at the moment. You've got you've described it's somewhat there, where you've got the Labour in administration as the Welsh government, inarguably slightly to the left of Labour across the rest of the UK. You have obviously you've got the Tories have something of a stronghold in parts of Wales. The Liberal Democrats still have representation in the Senedd. Then you've got Plaid. You've also got a kind of string of right-wing groups, whether it's the rump of UKIP or the Brexit Party or Abolish the Welsh Assembly, and then you've got the Greens. So putting aside the conversation around electoral agreements and so on, where do you think the Greens should be pitching themselves politically in that context, in terms of a left or right spectrum, but also what's the kind of key things that you think that the Greens should be fighting on electorally to kind of get that electoral success that we've talked about so far?
Well, I think front and centre is the climate emergency. I think Greens now in Wales should be unashamedly stating what our policy is. And we've got good policies, they've been well thought out. We have a lot of people that wrote the policies and co-wrote the policies that have a lot of knowledge. So we should push forward with our agenda and argue that the climate crisis, the climate emergency that we're facing at the moment, is what we should be campaigning on. So we also should be campaigning on our manifesto as we wrote it for the Senedd campaign, because it was a very good manifesto and well thought out. I think that it will always be difficult to swing votes towards from Labour. But having said that, that doesn't mean we don't try. I think that we will win votes from the Conservatives, the soft Conservatives, I would describe them as. The people in North Cardiff, a lot of them do vote Conservative, but a lot of them are also quite horrified by what Boris Johnson has done in recent times. So if we look at the people that we are up against, candidate by candidate, that is important. We have to look at our environments. There's a different area in Cardiff North from other areas of Wales. But essentially, I think we have the right policies, and that's what we should be proud of, and that's what we should push us forward as centre.
Okay, and just sort of following on from that, in about 6 months' time, we've got local elections happening in Wales. For those who don't know, or those who are outside of Wales, local elections in Wales don't happen in the kind of annual cycle like they do in England. They take place once every 5 years. In the last local elections, the Greens won 1 seat. As Deputy Leader, how will you make sure that there are more Green councillors across Wales this time next May?
It comes down to hard work, and it's not hard work from one or two people. It's got to be community efforts and community based. Now, I won't take responsibility for this because I do know that other areas of Cardiff are building their numbers. They're becoming stronger. And I met a few people yesterday who are relatively new to the party, but they are highly motivated and they are active and they are ready for campaigning. So it has to be a joint effort. It can't be one or two people doing a job. It's got to come from the people, really, hasn't it? We've got to persuade people to join us. We have to grow our numbers, our members and our supporters. And we have to ask them to help practically to support the party by coming out and campaigning, by helping maybe with internet activities, writing leaflets. Every person in this country, well, every person in the Green Party has a skill, and they'll bring different skills to the party. I mean, I've sometimes made decisions about what I should be doing, and I've listened to other Green members and thought, actually, they've got a point, maybe they're right. So I think part of being a deputy leader would be listening and following, as well as choosing and directing. Is that what a leader does? Do you lead from the back or do you lead from the front? I don't know. I honestly have very little information about what's going on in the Green Party in Wales as a whole. I know only really what happens in my own area. And that, I think, is part of our problem. We don't have a good communication strategy where we're sharing ideas and ambitions for our areas. I mean, the closest thing I'd say we've got to it is Facebook groups, and I'm linked into a couple of Facebook groups and I follow what other people are doing. But that's not really truly understanding what the Green Party is doing in the other areas of Wales.
So that's something that you've brought up a few times so far. So what's your solution to that? How do you improve that communication across local parties across Wales?
Well, it's a good question, and I wish I did know the answer. I mean, there's certain things you can try out and find out if they work. Actually talking to people in meetings is good. We have the Green Party conference coming up. I will be there on the 20th of November, and I'll be online on the 21st when we're having our AGM. So that's the point where we can all meet and talk together. The last time I believe we did that when I was present was the last AGM and conference, which was fully online. And that was quite interesting for me because it was my first conference. So I really need to learn about what is happening around Wales. And I think the only thing really I can say in terms of how I'll do it is I will dedicate my time to it, really. Either on the internet or I will go and visit the places around Wales where they would like me to visit, basically. So, like I say, leadership comes from the front and the back in certain respects. It's not just, for me, it'll be a lot about finding out where our party is now and how we can take it forward. So, and I know that the job of deputy leader is also the spokesperson. So knowing all of the policies in depth would be quite important to me. So I've learned an awful lot about things I didn't know before. I mean, my background is education, and I have a fair bit of knowledge about how the health service works. But things like planning, which is a big part of being a candidate, I'm having a crash course in that right now, actually, finding out what's going on and how people plan and how the county council works and how these buildings get through the planning process. So I'm not quite sure that answered the question you asked, but that's what's going through my head right now. But it is very difficult, I think, for a small group of people to be masters of all. It's very difficult to have enough knowledge to make a difference. You really have to work quite hard to find out what's going on, and you have to take advice from other people. That's speaking personally, I've taken a lot of advice from other people about planning, which I knew nothing about before.
So I want to talk a little bit about something that's been going on in the Wales Green Party over the last sort of few months. So in the last few months, we've seen a number of relatively high-profile members of the Welsh Greens leave the party and join Plaid. There's been a couple of Senedd candidates, including lead list candidates, who have done that, and Emily Durrant, who was the sole Green councillor in Wales just last week, defected to Plaid. What do you think's behind that?
I don't know, and that is part of the problem. I only actually have heard, so you've told me more than I actually know right now. I knew Emily Durrant had left and gone to Plaid because I read your article. That's how I found out. I mean, that is the state of information at play in Wales within the Green Party. It's not easy to figure out what's going on. So I didn't know anybody had left the Green Party apart from that. For myself, I have to, oh, go on, you say what you wanted to say.
I was just going to say that is quite damning if that's the picture that you're painting. The only reason that you knew about this was because of a piece that I wrote, and the Wales Green Party isn't communicating this within itself. So there has been a bit of an exodus, and you say that you weren't aware of it being on that scale, but as deputy leader, what will you do to stop that exodus continuing and then the party leaking members to Plaid in particular, but also losing members more generally?
I don't know. Can I be honest and say I'd like to think about that a little bit? I mean, you can't, we changed our policy last year. We changed it from we'd consider supporting independence to we will actively campaign to support independence. So a lot of those people on the borderline possibly didn't think there was much of a difference between the two parties. I can't speak for them, to be honest, because like I say, I didn't know they were leaving. I can only speak from a personal perspective, and I've never voted Plaid in my life. It's not a party I support. I understand that the argument of if we become independent, it might be easier to implement some of the Green Party policies that we have created in Wales. I understand that argument. From a personal point of view, I know where I stand when it comes to Plaid. I was Labour. I have in the past voted Lib Dem. Now I only vote Green because that is the only party that I believe represents my views. So I have to say honestly, if people are leaning towards Plaid, then I can't influence them to stay. But I think the bigger picture is, why aren't more people joining Greens at this stage with the climate emergency? Why aren't people joining Greens? And that, I think, is what I would pursue as a way of growing our membership. It does come down to, it's a climate emergency. Labour aren't doing what I'd hoped they'd do in order to, is mitigate the right word? But they don't seem to be doing what I would have hoped a government that cares about the people of the country would do. So Plaid is not strong in my area, which is possibly why I don't know why those people have left. The two parties that are strong in my area are Conservative and Labour. And where I am in Cardiff North is a swing seat between Conservative and Labour. It's been Labour for the last few years. So I've got to come back to, I don't know why people have left, because you've just told me they've left and I don't even know their names.
Well, I'm sure we'll speak again about that in the future then. I've got one sort of final long question for you before I go into some quick fire ones, which are slightly more fun. Imagine you're sitting where you are now in a year's time and you've been elected as deputy leader. What's the one thing you would be most proud of having achieved in that first year as deputy leader?
I think it would be, my aim would be to talk to every regional group and to actually get to know them as people, as well as get to know how people are working as a Green Party together. I'd also like to know, well, the question is, can I help you, isn't it? If I'm going to be a leader, I'm going to hopefully know that I've helped people by finding out, first of all, what they need and how we can take it forward.
Okay, so on to my slightly more flippant
On
questions. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you asked me about the leadership role. I think in a certain sense, leading from the front is very important because our campaign in Cardiff North is going to be quite strong. I'm not saying that we will get candidates in this coming election, but we have put together quite a comprehensive plan of how we are going to campaign. So, well, I suppose I'll be judged on that, won't I? But I am hardworking and I'm prepared to put the effort in.
Brilliant. So my flippant questions, quick fire. What's your favourite biscuit?
Ginger biscuits.
Ginger biscuit. And your favourite pizza topping?
I don't eat pizza, sorry.
Don't eat pizza. That would be controversial with the electorate.
Well, it's not that I can't eat pizza. I have an issue.
Okay. And then something else which will no doubt divide the electorate. Are you a cat person or a dog person?
Dog.
Interesting.
I don't mind cats. I don't have them because I have a dog that's scared of cats.
I see. That's fair enough. What's your favourite and what's your least favourite Green Party policy?
The most divisive one, I do think, is working with Plaid. So that's my least favourite, I have to say. My favourite policy has to be, I mean, I think I'd go for the Green Transformation Fund because it shows that we are a party that does understand the economics of the way the country works, and we have a policy to change in a very cool way the way the country is working now. And I'd give that credit to Tony Cook because I think he's done a lot of work on that.
What book has most shaped your politics?
I don't think there is one, I've got to be honest.
That's absolutely fine. My final flippant question for you is, which person in the Green Party inspires you the most?
Well, it's got to be Carolyn Lucas because she's achieved what she set out to.
Everyone always goes for Caroline, but for obvious reasons. Thank you so much, Deborah, for taking the time to speak to me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
So before you all leave, I just have a few final bits and pieces of admin to wrap up with. The first, you know what I'm going to say, you're going to scroll down and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done already. It means that you'll be able to catch all the rest of our interviews with the deputy and leadership candidates in the Welsh Green Party leadership elections. We've talked about quite a lot of different things here. Some of them I'm sure you have strong views on. If you have strong views on anything, you agree with it, you disagree with it, let us know in the comments down below and keep the conversation going there. Two final things to say to you. The first of them is that Bright Green doesn't have billionaire backers or big money, big business donors. We're exclusively funded by lovely, wonderful people like you. We ask people to give just £5 a month so that we can put out videos like this, that we can run more coverage of Green parties across the UK and across the world, as well as the Labour movement, social movements, and the wider left. If you are able to donate, please do head to bright-green.org/donate, and you can set up your donation there. And my final thing to say to you is, if you're a member of the Wales Green Party, don't forget to vote. You either will or should have a ballot arriving with you soon. Make sure that you vote in that election. We've got interviews coming up with the rest of the candidates imminently, so watch this space and make sure you vote. So that's all from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very, very soon.